Hello everyone, it's me Uncle John. Today I am going to read S66047, Arthur Accused, Chapter 1. Hello stranger, I'm Buster Baxter, Private Eye. You can call me Buster for short. I'm going to tell you about my first case. It involved my pal Arthur, some missing quarter, and a whole lot of trouble. The whole thing started 2 days ago. It was an ordinary Wednesday, the kind that comes right between Tuesday and Thursday, the middle of the week, and anything can happen, and usually does. The school day had just ended, and Arthur was standing in the school hallway behind the long table. In front of him was a bowl half filled with quarters. Help the fire department buy a new puppy, Arthur called. On your quarter. A couple of keys dropped in quarters. Thanks, said Arthur. Thanks a lot. Binky Barnes walked up to him. His head and shoulders blocked the light from the hall window. Hey, what's with the ball, Arthur? I'm collecting money for Mrs. McGrady's fund drive. We're going to buy a puppy for the fire department. He showed Binky a picture. No, the dog has a lot of spots. You see, you sure he isn't sick? No, Dalmatians all look like that. So what do you think? How about a quarter? Binky considered it. He weighed the thought of a shiny quarter against a little Dalmatian puppy. The puppy in his head rolled over and made a little snuffling sound, sat up and wagged his tail. The quarter just sat there being shiny. Here, said Binky. He reached into his pocket and flipped the quarter into the bowl. That's just one thing, he added, glaring at Arthur. What's that? Don't tell anybody I gave. It's bad for my image. Okay, said Arthur. The Binky seemed satisfied, at least for the moment. Hey, Arthur, yelled Buster as he ran down the hall. What's with the goofy hat? I asked. That hat is not goofy, said Buster. It's a fedora. Part of my new detective kit. I've been snooping, looking for crime. Have you found any? No, Buster pushed back the brim of his hat. But I did pick up some secret information. He peered to the left and right, making sure no one else was listening. He promised this would go no further. Arthur nodded. Buster leaned forward. The third grade picnic this Friday, whispered. Arthur rolled his eyes. I know that, Buster. They've been signed up for 2 weeks. Oh well. I was half right. It's still information. Anyway, I'm not giving up. I'll find a crime. Maybe I'll find one at the arcade. My mom is taking me there this afternoon. Wanna come? Most of the kids seem to have gone home. Arthur figured he had probably collected all the quarter he was going to get for the day, and the arcade was a great place. Sure, he said, just let me take these quarter to Mrs. McGrady. He emptied the quarter from the bowl into a paper bag. I'll go find my mom outside, said Buster. We'll wait for you. Hurry. Arthur nodded and ran down the hall. Chapter 2. I wasn't with Arthur for the next minute. Maybe if I had been, he wouldn't have had any problem. But as it says in the detective's handbook, when life takes a wrong turn, just try not to get lost. Arthur hurried to the cafeteria kitchen. He could tell that Mr. Morris, the janitor, had cleaned the floor since lunch. Clean enough to eat off of, Mr. Morris liked to say, but Arthur preferred the plates. Mrs. McGrady was on the phone. What is that, Chief? Have you thought of a name yet? Arthur waved, trying to get her attention. He didn't want to keep Buster and his mother waiting, but Mrs. McGrady didn't see him. Smoky, sure, that's a nice name for the dog. I see. Arthur tried to be patient. On the counter next to him were some baking ingredients. There were bags of flour, sugar, sticks of butter, eggs, and chocolate square. When there's Smoky, there's a firefighter. Cute. Chief, very cute. I just don't want the dog to get a complex. Dogs are sensitive, you know. The bag was getting heavy. Arthur said, and he went to put it down. Accidentally knocked over the bag of flour. Chester's a fine name for a dog, don't you think? My first husband was named Chester. Since Mrs. McGrady still wasn't watching, Arthur was able to clean up the flour without her seeing him. Some of it had gotten into the bag of quarter, but that was okay because flour wouldn't do the quarters any harm. Arthur looked at the clock. He had been standing there for more than 5 minutes. Mr. McGrady, excuse me, Mrs. McGrady. He held up the bag of quarter. She waved a hand, although whether she was waving to her, to Arthur, or making motions to the phone, it was hard to know. I'm just leaving, Arthur began. But Mrs. McGrady, still talking on the phone, had turned away. Arthur couldn't wait any longer. If he did, Buster would have a fit. Mrs. McGrady was bound to be off the phone soon. I'm leaving the bag on the counter, Arthur called out. Right here, next to the flower. Then he left. Chapter 3. When Arthur and I arrived at the arcade, I had two things on my mind. One was the games themselves. I wanted a return match with Alien Explorer, which had roughed me up at the last time. The game needed to be taught a lesson, and I was just the one to do it. The other thing on my mind was finding a mystery to solve. Arcades drew shifty characters, the way a garbage dump draws flies. I figured something would come my way if I kept a good lookout. Buster, said Arthur, what are you doing with that magnifying glass? Just checking things out. Buster was peering closely at the table. Some mysteries like to play hide and seek. He moved the glass back to Arthur, looking up and down. Look at you, for example. What about me? Said Arthur. You got white stuff on your clothes. I do not. Buster looked closer. Definitely some kind of powder. Arthur looked down. There was a little. Suddenly he smiled. Oh, that's no mystery. When I was dropping off the quarters in the cafeteria, I accidentally spilled some flour. It must have gotten on my shirt. Buster looked disappointed. Well, it could have been a mystery. Sorry, said Arthur. Anyway, I thought we were here to play. They made the rounds, playing some games themselves, and watching others play too. Neither of them was very lucky at surviving Crash Course 2000 or getting through the night at the haunted hotel. But Buster did better at Alien Explorer. Take that, you mangy mutant. He cried. Our revenge is sweet. The mutant had always done him in before. Just a few more minutes, boys. Buster's mother called out to them. She was waiting for them outside the arcade. Buster was out of money, but Arthur still had enough for one more game. He decided to try a pinball machine. He put in his quarters and pulled the knob. As he released it, the ball shot up the slot and around the ramp. Hey, go, Arthur, go, said Buster, who never had much luck at pinball. The ball ricocheted around the platform. Whenever it lost speed and fell downward, Arthur caught it with the flipper and sent it up again. Oh, that was close. Arthur, keep it up. As Arthur's score rose, machine lit up in more and more color. The crowd began to gather behind him. Watch out there. Hold it now. Arthur was on a roll. Go for the spinner. Arthur did his best, but finally the third ball dodged the right flipper and sank into the hole. Arthur, you did it. You hit the high score. Arthur looked up. He's 868,233 points in first place. He even got to put his initials next to them. That score will stand forever, said Buster. He pounded Arthur on the back as the onlookers cheers. When they left the arcade, Buster was excited. My best friend hit the high score. He said proudly to one and all. It wasn't the same as finding a mystery to solve, but it was still pretty good. Chapter 4. As much as I hated to admit it, I was starting to feel a little down. Why was it so hard to find a mystery to investigate? Did all detectives have these problems? Still, at least I had some good news to share at school the next day. Oh, step aside, everyone. Make way. Pinball wizards coming through. Buster made his comments as he and Arthur walked down the hall. Buster, please. It's embarrassing. Don't be so modest, Arthur. You deserve the attention, Arthur sighed. Nimble fingers here. Eyes like a hawk. Reflexes like a cat. As they passed the principal's office, Mr. Haney waved them in. Good morning, Arthur. Buster? He said, oh, Arthur, don't forget to give Mrs. McGrady the quarters you collected for her fun drive. I already did, Mr. Haney. The school secretary, Miss Tinkley, frowned. That's odd. She told me she never got them. Uh-huh. Maybe they were stolen. Buster, please contain yourself, said Mr. Haney. The principal turned to Arthur. Is it possible you brought them home by mistake? No, said Buster. He came straight to the arcade with me. In fact, he did very well at pinball. You're looking at Mr. High score. Really? Mr. Haney frowned. Miss Tingley frowned too. I got the high score once, Buster went on. Cost me a fortune. Took all my birthday money. Like 100 quarter. Boy, Buster stopped suddenly. He stared at Arthur. So did Mr. Haney and Miss Tingley. What's the matter? Asked Arthur. We have a little mystery here, said Mr. Haney. Miss Tingley frowned again. Not so little, she said. A short while later, Arthur found himself sitting in the principal's office. He felt very small. The chair he was sitting in was very uncomfortable. You're responsible for the money, Mr. Haney was saying. You certainly were. Miss Tingley said it. Arthur shrank further into the chair. He looked from one stern face to the other. You mean, you think I stole the quarters? But I left them on the cafeteria counter. Well, Mrs. McGrady never saw them, Mr. Haney said. You're responsible for them. If that money doesn't turn up, I'm afraid you'll have to serve a day. Miss Tingley cleared her throat. I mean a week of after-school detention. Mr. Haney paused. And no third-grade picnic for you tomorrow. Arthur was horrified as he left the office. Buster rushed up to him. So what happened? Arthur explained it to him. My first important job, and everyone thinks I'm a thief. But I'm innocent. Of course you are. That's why you need a detective like, say, me. I don't know, Buster. Do you really think you can find out what happened to the quarter? No problemo. I could solve this case in my sleep. Well, no, I guess I will have to be awake and not wearing my pajama either. But don't worry, Arthur. Buster Baxter is on the case. You will be going to that picnic tomorrow. Trust me. Arthur wanted to believe him, but he wished he felt more hopeful. Okay, Buster? Do your stuff. But promise me one thing. Sure, what is it? Try not to get me into any deeper trouble than I am in now. Things are bad enough as it is. In every case, there is a key witness, and this case was no different. I knew who she was. She knew who she was too. Last time, McGrady, Mrs. Cafeteria lady, Buster found Mrs. McGrady in the cafeteria kitchen. She was mixing ingredients in a large bowl. He explained that he was investigating the disappearance of Arthur's quarters. Can you tell me your whereabouts yesterday afternoon? Whereabouts? That's a pretty fancy way of asking me where I was. Well, I was right here in the kitchen making brownies. Buster, keep your hands away from that bowl. Aha, said Buster, pulling back his hand. Maybe I should taste this. It could be evidence. Mrs. McGrady waved a spatula at him. Nice try, but you'll have to wait for the picnic like everyone else. She moved over to a long table covered with tiny cherry tarts, began squirting whipped cream onto each one. I remember speaking to the chief. We had quite a long conversation. Then I made the brownies. Did you see Arthur? No, I didn't see anyone all afternoon. Oh, wait, that's not true. Mr. Morris was here. My mixer jammed a few times and the brownie mix overflowed onto the floor. He came in to mop up the mess. Said Buster, popping one of the cherry tarts into his mouth. Maybe you should talk to Mr. Morris. Mrs. McGrady suggested. Make you very hutch, Buster mumbled and went out before she could say anything. He found Mr. Morris, the school janitor, pushing a cart along the hallway. Excuse me, Mr. Morris. May I ask you a couple of questions? Shoot. Buster explained that he was trying to recreate the sequence of events from the previous afternoon. Sequence of events? Eh? You sound like one of the TV detective shows. Really? Said Buster. He beamed. Then he remembered that detectives don't beam and try to look serious again. Tell me about yesterday. Well, let's see. I was in the teacher's room. Said Buster suspiciously. And what were you doing there? Changing a light bulb. Then I got the call to go to the kitchen. Seems Mrs. McGrady was having some trouble with her mixer. When I got there, the floor was covered with brownie batter. So I cleaned up the mess. Buster folded his arm. And do you always clean up after Mrs. McGrady? No, not often. She's pretty tidy as a rule. But I was glad to help. Anything else? Buster wanted to think of more questions. He liked asking questions, but he couldn't think of any. Not at the moment. But do me a favor and don't leave town. Whatever you say, Buster. He gathered up his bucket and mop, started to walk away. With each step, he made a jingling sound. Just a minute. Buster ran to catch up to him. That jingling sounds like quarters, a lot of quarter. Pulled a huge key ring full of keys from his pocket. I know what you mean, he said, jingling it. I've often thought that's the same thing myself. Oh, well, that's all right then. Wasn't really all right, though, thought Buster, at least not for Arthur. He had hoped to get to the bottom of the case quickly, but the more he dug, the more complete the case became, and the bottom was nowhere in sight. Chapter 6. I had been on the job a couple of hours, but aside from one cherry tart, I had little to show for it. Nobody was calling the suspect a liar, but nobody could support his theory either. I thought maybe a change of scene would help, so I made my way to the suspect's home. There I met up with the suspect's sister. She seemed to be a pretty cool customer, but I knew I could handle her. Come on, DW, you must know something. They were standing in the Ree's kitchen. Arthur had gone out for a while, DW had said, but he couldn't go far. He figured the police were probably watching the train and bus station, and his pictures are probably on wanted posters by now, she said. DW, I'm trying to clear Arthur, not send him to jail, not think hard. DW made a face. All right, I'll tell you what I know. Go on. Buster got out his pad and pencil. Ready? Okay, take this down. Every single word. Buster nodded. That hat looks silly on you. Buster put down his pencil. This is serious, DW. Besides, I like the hat. DW giggled. Now back to the subject. And what is this, Buster? The third degree? If I knew anything, I would have slept and tell. Well, maybe not you, but somebody. Buster pushed back his fedora. Don't try that smoke screen stuff on me. I can see through you like a window. Now, think back to yesterday. Did Arthur bring home any big jingling bags, absent-mindedly? DW glared at him. Buster, you're talking about my brother? He'll never take other people's money and bring it home like that. Calm down, DW. I don't think Arthur would do anything bad on purpose, but, he could have been forgetful. I'm just checking out every possibility. Arthur is not that stupid, DW went on. Clearly, she had been giving the matter some serious thought. He wouldn't just bring the money into the house. Too many questions to answer. Too many people might see it. But he would want it close by. Hidden safe. But where? That's what I can't quite figure out. Not that Arthur is so clever, but still, she scratched her head. Of course, we should check the lawn for signs of recent digging. But DW, she ran out the door. Before Buster could follow her, Arthur walked in. Oh, Buster, I'm glad you're here. Did this mean good news? Sorry, Arthur. Case is still wide open. Arthur sighed. I'm just trying to be thorough. Buster explained. Detectives need to be thorough. Buster, if you don't find out who did it by tomorrow, I'll miss the picnic. I know, I haven't. He hesitated as DW passed by, carrying a shovel. Excuse me, step aside. Coming through. Arthur stared at DW and started to say something, but Buster held up his hand. You've been off not asking. You're better off not asking. He said, you really don't want to know. In the end.